Chanavatar Caitanya-Līlā Vistarkadino Do Nityananda Prabja Karunarena Bhushito Vyaktachano Burachancho Vavande Vyasarupino Shri Guru Gaur Gandharva Govindascha Ganaisaha Jayanti Patakaschacha Sarvesham Gurunartino. Okay, so here we are. Beautiful London devotees, and we're in Rūpa Shiksha, and this is a very exciting section. Mahāprabhu giving this analogy of the creeper of devotion, right? Well, beginning with the seed, bhakti-latā-bīja, the seed of devotion. Vishakha. So it's very cool actually to go through this, because we always hear about this, right? The seed of faith, the seed of devotion, the bhakti-latā-bīja, the creeper or vine of devotion. But where does it come from? It comes from right here, right? Mahāprabhu telling this to us. It is Mahāprabhu's analogy. And also another cool thing is that Śrīla Maharaj, he included this in our Gurudev's pranam mantra, right? Premo, I have to say the whole words. Do you remember the line? Gorva vishta supurakam guruganaya shisha sambhushitam chincha chincha samasta veda nipunam Shri Rūpa pantanugam govindabhiramujvalam bharatanam bhaktyambitam sundaram Vande Vishwa Guruncha Divya Bhagavat Premno Hi Bija Pradam. Bhagavat Premno Hi Bija Pradam. That you can give the seed of devotion, right? For Bhagavan, for the Lord. Bhagavat Premno Hi Bija Pradam. That you can give that. So that's a big thing to say, right? And Śrīla Maharaj personally said that about our Gurudev. He has that capacity. And to who? Vande Vishwa, you are Guruncha, you are Guru of the whole world, he says. You are Vishwa Guru. You are qualified to give the seed of devotion to the whole world. Śrīla Maharaj is saying that. And so that seed of devotion, we could say it is faith, right? It starts with faith. And that's what that seed is. And when the guru accepts the disciple, it's a transaction of faith, right? That the guru is saying, I have faith in you, that you can follow this under my guidance. And the disciple is saying, I have faith in everything that you're teaching me. And I have faith that you can help me, and I'm going to try, right? So it starts with that little seed of faith, and then nourishing that in the proper, just like any seed, under the proper conditions, it can develop and manifest into a beautiful plant, flowering plant, tree, and so on. It's such a wonderful analogy, because there are so many interesting things that come from that. Like, one thing about seeds is that there have been some cases of seeds where they've been left dormant for hundreds of years, like just preserved somehow, and then, so many hundreds. I heard of one, it was like 1,000, 2,000 years. Some seeds had been preserved in some archaeological site somehow, and there's like 1,000, 2,000 years old, and they were able to grow them. So in the same way, when we receive that seed from Guru, right, when there's that initial transaction, the circumstances of our heart, the environment of our heart, it may not be so favorable, right? At that time, it would be like, you throw a seed on a slab of cement, right? Or completely barren conditions in the desert. But then, maybe years, maybe lifetimes later, right? then those favorable conditions may develop, right? And that's also, this is one reason why we want to take advantage of the opportunity that we have, right? Because, you know, like we can't get lazy, think, oh, well, you know, it's always going to be there, right? Oh, I can go back to it any time. But the reality is, you know, we have the opportunity now, right? The environment is favorable now, and we don't know how everything can change in an instant, right? And now our life is somehow or another supporting this, that I'm able to cultivate this, and I'm able to give some focus to this. But everything could change tomorrow, right? This life is here in front of us now. You know? We have this opportunity. We don't know what will be tomorrow, right? In the Divine Servitor, that Gurudev's book, there's a really beautiful passage where he's speaking about this and saying, you know, so many lives have passed before us, you know, we don't need to think about that, right? And so many things may be ahead of us, we also don't need to think about that. But here in front of us now, we have this opportunity, right? And we want to use this. And he also said, like, let's give one life for Krishna, you know, something like that, you know. We've actually already done everything in all of our previous lives, right? We've done everything already. And who knows what may be in the future, but right now, let's at least give one life, right? Give one life for Krishna's cause, and ultimately my own highest cause, my own highest benefit. So, going back to this analogy, wonderful analogy of the seed of devotion, bhakti-latā-bīja. Mahāprabhu, he really develops this, right? This analogy quite elaborately. And so he says, you know, he starts off giving this analogy, and he says, you know, one who has received the seed, they have to become a gardener, right? Oh, and there's also that famous verse, right? Brahmanda Brahmite kon bhagyavanji hu Krishna prasada pai bhakti-latā-bīja. You must have learned that verse, right?
I've heard it many times. Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the process.
You don't, as long as you know it, it's fine. You don't necessarily have to memorize it. But yeah, so there's that famous verse. And we hear of that incident when that devotee, Achyutananda, right? That Srila Prabhupada sent him to study under Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and there was that incident when he, there were a few interesting incidents that took place when he was there, but on one occasion, I think it was when he stayed in Hapanya for a short while, and there was one Bengali gentleman who asked him, you know, how is it? You know, we're born here, you know, we're living here, and we don't have so much interest in all of this, but you've come from so far and you're giving your life for this. How is this possible? And Achyutananda responded with this verse, you know, Brahmanda Brahmite kon bhagyavanji, right? It doesn't depend on, you know, where you're born and what your culture is, but if you've received that fortunate connection from Guru and Krishna, then you will feel that, right? That awakenment in your heart. It doesn't matter if it's on your doorstep, but if you didn't get that connection from the exalted Vaishnava, then it won't awaken within you. So wandering and wandering throughout so many different planes of life, throughout the course of so many lifetimes, the Bhagyavan Jeev, the fortunate soul, by the grace of Guru and Krishna, bhakti-latā-bīja, they receive this seed of the vine of devotion. Then Mahāprabhu goes on, Mali hoya kode se bij, and then that devotee, they must become a gardener, and they have to water that seed. With what water? The waters of Shravan and Kirtan, right? Hearing and chanting. That is how we can nourish that seed, right? Help the sprout to awaken. then Upajiya bhakti-latā bīja. And then now this is very interesting here. It's describing how, through in this process, right, of following all the processes of devotional service, then this seed will start to sprout, right? That sprout grows into a vine, and then that vine, it will grow to the point where it pierces through all the different layers within the universe, then eventually reach Goloka Vrindavan and bear fruit there and blossom there, right, in Goloka Vrindavan. And so this is very interesting, because what this is actually doing is it's representing how what are all these different layers that the vine is growing through? These are all different planes of consciousness, actually, right? And then what is that consciousness? It's determined according to the degree of exploitation and renunciation, right? And so the higher planes, they are more subtle, there's more pervasive spirit of dedication, sacrifice, right? Then the lower planes, they are denser planes based more on the spirit of exploitation. And so what's actually happening is that the seed, this vine, is representing the faith of the individual becoming stronger, right, and growing through and being able to overcome all these different planes of exploitation through all its more gross and more subtle layers. So there are so many different attractions, right? And all these attractions, they actually all represent different types of thought and different types of consciousness. And one very nice way, I really, really like our Gurudev explained this, was in terms of gravity, right? That everything has its gravitational pull, right? So why are we here? Because we are attracted, our current plane of consciousness is attracted by the gravitational pull of this plane, right? Gravitational pull in terms of the consciousness, right, of this plane. In other words, Bor, right? Borloka. Borlok means the plane of physical experience and enjoyment, right? Whereas higher planes, it's more subtle types of enjoyment. But this is the plane of physical enjoyment. We're on the sensory plane, right? So our senses are very much attracted to all the proposals of this world, all the different types of enjoyment that is available in this world, right? So we are attracted by the gravitational pull. That's why we're stuck here, in a sense, right? we're pulled. But as we evolve, then we will feel less the gravitation. It won't have any hold over us, right? We won't, just like an astronaut, when they leave the gravitational pull of Earth, we see the videos of them like floating in their thing, right? They're not under the influence of the gravity anymore, right? And so in the same way, when we reach a certain level of consciousness by the development of our faith and devotion, we will no longer be under the influence, right, of the pull of this world, right? Just like Mahāprabhu and his Shikshashtakam, that Shunyayate, that's Raghunath Goswāmī, but Govinda Virahena Me, that verse where he's describing everything's a void, right? Without you, O Lord, this whole world is just a void. I don't see anything, right? So, when a pure devotee comes here, like Srila Prabhupada, I heard from Pushta Krishna Prabhu, who was one of his servitors. He said that once they were in an airport, and Srila Prabhupada was like looking around, and he said, I just see cadavers. Right, I just, dead bodies. I just see, he's looking around and everyone's absorbed in the pursuit of the mind and the senses, the ego. And for him, it's all just the dead bodies walking, right? With no awakenment of the higher self, no awakenment of the soul, no consciousness of our Lord, our higher aspiration, and so on. They're just like a dead body walking. Right? So that was what Srila Prabhupada saw, you know. And what would we see? You know, so many beautiful men or women, and shopping and nice food and so on, and all these things of, you know, Disneyland, you know. But for someone who's, you know, like in Bhagavad Gita, that verse, I was just trying to remember the other day and I've forgotten it again, that, you know, one who is awake in the world of spirit, this world of the senses is like night, right? And conversely, one who's awake in the plane of the senses, that world of spirit is like darkness, like night. They're awake in the conditioned souls are awake in the darkness of this world, the experience of the senses, and asleep to that higher plane. But for the enlightened souls, it is just the opposite, right? And so this vine, this creeper, bhakti-latā of devotion, as it grows, right? Meaning you could also say we become more under the influence of the pull of that higher plane, right? Because that also has its own gravitational pull, right? We're less under the influence of the gravitational pull of this plane, and then our faith, our consciousness, our spirit of devotion is becoming stronger and stronger. We're evolving through all these different planes of consciousness, which are getting more and more subtle, right? And there are also so many other types of attractions in the higher planes, you know. And in fact, we hear that this world is the best place because there's like a balance of enjoyment and suffering. And, you know, we may be in relatively good circumstances, but we know, like, just across the ocean, some really horrible things are going on. We're aware of the, or even, you know, could be our neighbor, so many horrible things. We know of the darkness in this world, so that helps to, like, kind of wake us up, like, oh, this isn't a place to get too comfortable, right? So there's, like, a balance here of heavenly pleasure and also hellish experience. And so that actually helps us to, like, stay on our toes and stay awake and don't mess around. But in the higher planes, there's much more enjoyment and more subtle enjoyment. So it's actually harder to become free of the charm, right, of those planes. So, but by the grace of Guru Vaishnava, the fortunate soul, their faith is growing, their devotion is growing, becoming stronger and stronger, and then they can pass through all these charms and eventually awaken in pure love in Goloka Vrindavan. So it's a very, very nice analogy. And Then Mahāprabhu mentions, and I believe it's 3 different dangers that we have to be aware of, you know, and again, developing upon this analogy of the seed, that, you know, you're growing your little plant in the garden, and you have to guard, right? You have to protect. You have to water, right? You have to give the nourishment, the fertilizer. And those are all our positive practices, right, of devotion. But then you also have to protect from other things that can come and disturb your little tender plant, right? And so the first thing Mahāprabhu mentions here is the mad hati-mata, the mad elephant, right? And this is the most serious problem that we'll face. And that hati-mata, that mad elephant, is represent, and, you know, in modern is not the right, but in our environment, we could say, you know, the local foxes or something, right? Not quite as poetic as an elephant. But so many garden pests, right? Or creatures that can come and disturb your... We'll have to ask Devananda. Right? Snails. Oh no, snails, that sounds too boring. Yeah, snails, okay. Okay, so, we have to guard against outside creatures that will come and eat up your plant, right? No, but the elephant will actually like dig it up, right? That's the thing, from its root. And so this is representing Vaishnava-aparad, right? As everybody knows, this is famous analogy. So this is the most serious thing, to be careful about our tendency to criticize. It is a human tendency, so we can't avoid it, but we have to manage it, at least at our stage. We have to manage it. It is the nature of the mind, right? The mind likes to work with limitation, objective experience, right? There's a very nice explanation of Saraswati Thakur I like very much, where he says criticism is always based on empiricism. In other words, what you're seeing with your senses. And that's something superficial, actually. Like something about someone is wrong or it just bothers us, but it's all superficial. We don't know what is behind that, right? We don't know what consciousness is behind that. We don't know their history. We don't know what they'll have to face in the future. So many things. We don't know how Krishna may be managing them, right? We have no idea. We're just looking at something on a surface level and we don't like it or we think it's wrong, right? It's all just empiricism. Consideration of mercy and so many other things in the background. So it is the nature of the mind. It likes to analyze, to measure that whole mental, intellectual world, to limit, right? This is also one meaning of the word Maya, right? Measurement, to measure, right? Vaikuntha means no limit, the plane of no measurement, no limits. It is an unlimited, infinite plane. But this world, everything, this is the nature of Maya, like to reduce things, to limit things, to quantify, to qualify. And so naturally our mind is looking at the world, and then the problem is, Vaishnavas, right? We're using that lens and seeing the Vaishnavas and judging them, right? According to our limited understanding and perception of the world. So we have that tendency as humans, but we gotta keep an eye on that, right? We have to watch out for that tendency. We have to be careful about that tendency and try to inform our mind of Vaishnava principles, right? And try to abide by Vaishnava principles, in particular, Trinada, peace, and Nichena, right? Humility, tolerance, and respect. These are our core Vaishnava principles. And so these, and Gurudev mentioned that once, that this is why these principles are so important, because they will protect us from this mad elephant offense of Vaishnava-aparad. Because it is the only real danger, we can also say, in the sense that it's not only going to, hold us back, but if it gets bad enough, it could destroy us. And there's nothing else that can harm us in the way that Vaishnava-aparad can harm us. Because, we're told we can completely lose our wealth. Of course, the degree to which we're harming ourselves is also proportionate to the degree of how serious the offense is, right? But, simple criticism, that is also harming us to some degree. So it is, it was something our Gurudev emphasized so much. And once he said, I'm only afraid of one thing, that is Vaishnava-aparad. And he said, even if I see someone has just like a little spark of devotion in their heart, I'm very careful with them, because I don't want to make any offense. He said that himself. So it's something we really have to be careful of. We also heard Gurudev, he gave that explanation, right? Somebody asked him once, we see in the beginning that ISKCON, when Srila Prabhupada began his movement in the West, it just exploded, right? And there was so much of this fresh energy and so many crowds and crowds of people were coming, and and you hear so many wonderful stories from some of the older devotees, how much austerity they all embraced actually, and we're talking about hundreds, thousands, on such a huge scale, and embracing this extreme austerity. Many of them will be out all day, right, distributing books, coming back, taking cold showers, and sleeping on the floor in a dormitory. I mean, I'm sure you've heard some stories too, so much. And so someone asked her, Gurudev, that we see that in the beginning it was spreading so much, and there was so much energy, and then at a certain point that died down. And of course, it's still going on in its own, glorious way, but you can't say it compares to what it was. Right? And so our Gurudev, he said that in the beginning, there were no Vaishnavas. But then later on, they all became Vaishnavas, and they started making offense to one another. They all started making offense to one another because they became Vaishnavas. And so then they were actually harming each other by that spirit of criticism and so on. So really, we can't really understand how important it is, right, and how careful we have to be. Of course, things can also go the other way, right, where sometimes our devotees can get a complex about being afraid to say something's wrong or point something out. Things can get a little weird and culty sometimes, right? We also see that. And the thing is, it has to be understood that Vaishnava aparadha doesn't mean you're observing something as wrong, but it's that spirit of envy and criticism, hatred. That's what aparadha is. Not if you're observing, oh, this is wrong, we need to do something about it, or this is an example of what not to do, right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur also talks about that. For instructional purposes, we may need to observe, right? Oh, this is not correct. So that is something that has to be understood, right? Okay, so this is the first danger that Mahaprabhu mentions here, that we have to protect, and he uses this analogy of making a fence, right? We could think of Trinadapi Sunichena, right, as that fence, protecting that elephant, mad elephant from entering and uprooting. Then another analogy here is given of weeds. And that, you're watering your little tender sprout, but there are also weeds growing up, and you may also be watering those weeds. And those weeds are taking all the nourishment. They may be strangling that plant, right, as well. Sometimes you see very beautiful weeds. I've seen in a few places, these trees that have these invasive plants.
Parasites.
Yeah, that's right. They're called parasites, aren't they? And they can be very beautiful, but they're actually strangling the tree, right? They're killing the tree. And so similarly, there may be some weeds growing up around our plant, and we may be watering them, not thinking about it, but they're actually taking some of the nutrients. They're compromising the growth of our own creeper, may even be strangling that creeper, so it's hindering its growth, right? So what are those weeds, right? They represent everything that is not Krishna, right? Our desires for, for name, fame, enjoyment, and so on. All these things are our desires for exploitation, renunciation, pratishta, all these things. And what's very funny is that it can be at a point where it's so mixed, right? And what's actually our what's meant to be our practice of devotion, it becomes mixed with our desires for pratishta, and we can't even like separate it, right? So like, let's say, for example, someone who makes a lot of money, right? Or they're giving like big donations to the temple, but then they have some, and they're doing that as a service, but then they have some ego that, oh, I'm giving so much. In any case, right? The cook, the manager, whatever it may be, the preacher, they're actually doing this as a service, but it's become mixed with their ego. And so or kirtan, right? The kirtan is like our #1 practice. But someone may be very talented with kirtan, and then they're doing the kirtan in principle as a service, but it's actually nourishing their ego, right? And so in the same way, we're watering that our plant, but we're also simultaneously nourishing those weeds, right? In the same way that our so-called devotional activity, it may just be nourishing our ego, right? It may not be doing anything for our actual growth of devotion, right? So that's something we have to be vigilant about. That requires capacity for introspection. That requires sadhu sangha, right? That having association, and ideally of higher Vaishnavas, but at least those who have the same ideal, that helps us to self-reflect, right? And they're also, if they are more developed than ourselves, then they are having a clear estimation of what is our situation, and by their grace that may come to us, right? Om jnana timirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshur unmilitanyena tasmai shri guruve namaha, right? That we are blind, right? We have cataracts in our eyes, and who is Guru? Guru is coming with the light of knowledge. He's coming to clear our vision, opening our eyes, giving us vision. So the Vaishnavas, they're helping to remove our ignorance and give us awareness of what is our actual condition, what it is that we're actually trying to do, right? So sadhu sangha, everything always comes back to that, right? The importance of sadhu sangha. So there's fencing, there's weeding, and then I think there's a third one. Oh no, maybe it's those two. But there were 3 practices though, because the first one is watering it, right? So those are the 3 aspects to gardening here, to nourishing our bhakti-latā-bīja, to water with the positive, give fertilizer, right, with all the positive practices. Then we have to protect from invaders, from intruders, the spirit of offense, criticism, and then thirdly to weed, right, and to keep our heart clear of all these unwanted tendencies. And also in line with this, we can also think of Gundicha Marjan, right, which just passed the other day. Same idea, right? Mahaprabhu's cleaning, inviting the Lord to come and enter the hearts, right? That's what it's really representing. But first, cleaning very beautifully, very spotlessly, and not just once, but multiple times, like 2 or 3 times. He's cleaning the same area again to get out all the fine, particles that may remain. And Saraswati Thakur has a very nice purport on that chapter where he explains that, all the dust and the dirt, the dust, old, like dried grass, everything Mahaprabhu collects, they all represent different tendencies within ourselves that are, unwanted tendencies. And how we have to, and the fact that Mahaprabhu does it multiple times, demonstrating how vigilant we have to be, right? Because that's the thing, right? These things, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, these things can grow up within us in a very kind of insidious way. And like, oh, then years may go by, oh, what happened, you know? Or we may remember 10 years ago, I was so enthusiastic to do this service. I remember how excited I was when I chanted japa or went to the kirtan or went to wash dishes, and now I don't have that anymore, right? Like, what happened, you know? It can happen very slowly. We don't even notice. And so we're being advised here, like, you know, be alert, like, be awake, be careful. You know, you're on guard. You have to protect your plant. You know, keep the CCTV. Like, watch over it. You know. So this vigilance and self-reflection has to be there. Am I giving the right water? Is it getting enough sun? Just like a good gardener, right? Like, what's the plant's not growing? Like, what's happening? You know? Like Satish taking care of Tulasi and all the devotees. You know. Like, there's so many different factors have to be considered, right? The humidity, the temperature, the sun, and so on, right? How much water, and all these things. So we want to every day take care of our bhakti-latā-bīja with that type of spirit, right? Have I given the water? Have I watched against any intruders, you know, and all these things. And Gurudev also used the analogy of, he used that Urdu word, saltamami, right? Do like an accounting, an audit, right? At the end of the day, we can do an audit, like how much was incoming, how much was outgoing, how much should I do for my devotional life today, and how much didn't I do, right? We can consider that, reflect on that, you know, and try better tomorrow.
Maybe you can explain what is the meaning of bhakti-latā-bīja for those newcomers who are watching.
Okay, well, the bhakti everybody knows, right? Bhakti is devotion. Lata means, it's usually translated as creeper, but nowadays I think people don't really use that word so much unless they're guarded. That's why I like to say vine. And then bij is seed, right? And so bhakti-latā-bīja means the seed of this vine of devotion, right? And that we receive at the time of initiation, as we discussed. Guru is giving us prospect. That's another way Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained it, actually. He's giving us, our Guru is giving us this prospect. It's an asha, a hope. We could also think of it like that. They've planted a particular aspiration within our heart. And we have to nourish that and grow that. Right? Because what is Krishna consciousness ultimately? It's an aspiration. And we see this word asha, it's used in many places in our Guru's writings, right? That it's something that we always aspire for. And so we may have never, you know, had any interest, but our Gurus, they're giving us that. They're giving us some, that's what Sukriti is, actually. Sukriti means that some appreciation, right, is developed within you for this, right? That, oh, you have some attraction, some aspiration is starting to develop within you. That's the outcome of Sukriti, right? And so they're giving us this little seed of devotion, of faith, of aspiration. And if we take care of it, then it can grow into a beautiful fruit, flower-giving vine. So the ball's in our court, right? To become good gardeners, you know, or to be neglectful and and these temples, they provide very good conditions, right? Good conditions to nourish the bhakti-latā-bīja. All the right ingredients are here. Should we stop there? Is there anything else you want to add? Okay. Jai Shri Gurudeva Ki Jai. Hari Haraya Namah Krishna Jadavaya Namaha.
Hari Haraya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha.
Hari Haraya Namah Krishna Jadavaya Namaha.
Hari Haraya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha.
Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha.
Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha.
Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudana.
Gopala Govinda Ram Madhusudana.
Giridhari Gopinatha Madana Mohana.
Giridhari Gopinatha
Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra.
Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra.
Tadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Radha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta.
Jai Rūpa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunatha.
Rūpa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha.
Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Rasa Raghunatha.
Jiva Gopala Bhatta.
Jai Gosai Kodi Charana Vandana.
Jai Gosai Kori Charana Vandana.
Jaha Hoite Vignana Shabishta Purana.
Yaha Hoite Vijnana
Jai Gosai Jai Mui Taradasa.
Jai Gosai Yara Mui Taradasa.
Dansa Bada Pada Denu Moda Panchagrasa.
Sabara Padare.
Sajada Charana Sebi Bhakta Sanevasa.
Jera Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanivasa.
Janame More Abhilasha.
Janame Janame Mora.
Jai Gosai Jabe Braje Koilo Vasa.
Jai Gosai Jabe Bhaye Kola Vasa.
Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Kodila Gosvāmī Maharaj ki Jai, Śrīla Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Gosvāmī Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Sundar Radha Giri Hariju ki Jai, all the assembled devotees ki Jai, all the world devotees ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Is there anything on the calendar today, or maybe not? Huh?
No, I think it's
Okay.
on the 1st.
Okay. Jai Gaur Premanande.